Hi, I hope you're all doing very fine. Welcome to my first YouTube video ever. I think that's the first I'm gonna post. So welcome, my name is Mina and I'm French, half Serbian. I live in France and I decided to create a YouTube channel in English. Some of y'all might already know me from Instagram. I have a bookstagram account that I used for like 5 years, and I decided to get started on booktube. Very anxious, this video is gonna be very awkward. I'm just an awkward person and I'm very stressed. I don't know if today is the right day to start filming. It's like 5 in the afternoon, so the sun might set and there is like this huge cloud in front of me. So this might get very dark. I apologize. I was thinking what should I film for my first video, and I decided to make a very simplistic, basic video. Even though we're in February, I really wanted to film my favorite books of 2021. So this is gonna be a top 9. It's so random. I have like 7 books that really marked my year, and I wanted to mention 2 of them that are not in this list, honorable mentions, because these 2 books are really underrated and I wanted to talk about them. I guess we'll get started. So, 2 honorable mentions. The first book I'm gonna mention in this list is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This is so underrated to me. I feel like no one ever talks about this book, and yet I feel like it's so good. I read Warcraft by this author and didn't like it at all, so I was really stressed out about The Kingdom of Back, but then I bought it and I read it and I loved it. This is like a historical fiction mixed with magical realism, and you're basically following Mozart's sister, so that's a real story. Mozart did have a sister who was very talented. He was kind of in his shadow, no one really knows of her, but she wrote many of the songs that Mozart composed. Like, she composed many stuff. She was really talented and she was just forgotten by history because she is a woman. And this book follows kind of her story with her perspective from her very young age to her being like 20, I think. But you're following her life. Her name was Nannerl. She was such a sweet person. She also had a big love for her brother. It's a lot about family relationship, how even though she really wanted to be remembered, she still loved her brother more than everything. Like, this is really a story about brothers and sisters more than anything, which I love. Also has an aspect of magical realism because, and that's I think real too, but Mozart and Nannerl, when they were children, they like created this fictional world called the Kingdom of Back, which they were like going to and stuff, a real thing that Mozart talked about. But in this book, it's like this world of the Kingdom of Back is made real. It's not a huge aspect of the story, and I know lots of people were disappointed in this book because it's not like a fantasy book or anything, but it does have that little fantasy aspect, which I absolutely loved personally. Like, I loved that addition to the story. And I loved seeing this character, this narrator, Nannerl, grow up from a young girl to a woman. I loved seeing her relationship with her brother. I loved learning more about her, discovering her, honestly, her love for music, her love for her family, society in like Austria and Europe in general at that time. This book is a lot about feminism and the woman's place in the society, and the magical aspects were super interesting. This book reminded me a lot of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I mean, I didn't really love The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. It was an okay read to me, but if you liked it, you're definitely gonna like The Kingdom of Back. Characters focus, and if you like the characters, you're gonna love this book. If you like slower books, focus on like characters, personalities and stuff, it's so amazing. And after I finished it, it really stayed in my mind for a long time. And after that, I like kept listening to Mozart's music. I feel like the more times goes by, the more I love books that have like a very big impact on reality. Like, I love nonfiction, memoirs, and books that are inspired by real people. I love that because I love when I finish the book, it feels real, and then I can just go check stuff about the real person, and I just love that connection that I have to this person then. And even though, of course, Nannerl died like years and years ago, I felt very connected to her after reading this book, and it just stuck with me for a long time. So I would highly recommend it. That is one of the books that I really loved this year, even though it's not on my favorite lists, is The Stationery Shop of Tehran. I don't know how to pronounce it, and it was written by Marjan Kamali. This is an amazing book that I read last summer, and I absolutely adored it. This is a historical fiction book too. I really should read more historical fiction in 2022 because I love it so much. This is a historical fiction book that kind of reminded me of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, so if you like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, you might like this one. I didn't love The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but I loved this book. This is set in Iran, and at the beginning of the book, actually, you're in the United States and you're following this older woman. She's visiting one of her friends at a hospital, I think, and she hasn't seen him in years, and he was her first love. And then you go to 1953 and you're following these two people's relationship and how they fell in love and then ultimately separated, and it's their life. So it's all about this country, Iran, during the revolution. It's all about politics, but also a romance between two people, and it's also a story about a Persian culture, which I grew a very big interest in. Thanks to this book, so thank you. This was a beautiful story. It was kind of slow at first, and I was kind of underwhelmed. So at first it was, but the more you read it, the more you get attached to these people, and then you finish it, and I can't explain the feeling I got when I finished this book. It's like a feeling of utter sadness, but also happiness, and I felt like I literally have been through a lifetime with these people, and it felt weird. It stuck with me. Same as with The Kingdom of Beck, it literally stuck with me for a long time after that, because I just felt like I've been through a lifetime with these characters. I've been through so many things with them, and I have witnessed their life, and it felt really weird, but also kind of sad, because this book is a lot about miscommunication and two people who like can be together, but it's not their fault, and it can be infuriating, and at the end you can kind of feel like, what's the point of life? But it also will make you feel very happy and ultimately very emotional, and it's a beautiful story that's very underrated. So little people know this book, and I thought it was amazing, and I really feel like many people would like it. So I would highly recommend it to you. If you love historical fiction, romance, books that aren't set in the United States or any European country, like if you want to know more about Persian culture, again, a very character-focused book, and perfect to read in the summer, so it was amazing. I loved it, and I would recommend it. Now let's get started on my favorites list. All the books that I read in 2022 and that are like my top faves. So let's go. And it's the last book in the An Ember in the Ashes quartet, A Sky Beyond the Storm. My favorite book. I mean, An Ember in the Ashes is my favorite series, period. My favorite quartet, my favorite series. Like, if you will follow this channel, you'll hear about it quite a lot, because I constantly talk about An Ember in the Ashes and just push it down your throat. And this book is no exception. It was amazing. My most anticipated release of 2020. I loved this fourth book. I'm currently rereading the series. I mean, I only reread the first book, but the second one is on the way, and this series means the world to me. This fourth book was amazing. I just only wish I reread the first three books before. I feel like I would have been in a bigger mood, but I still loved it. It was amazing. It was a roller coaster of emotions, and I think I never cried as much as I cried when I was reading this book. Honestly, recently, like yesterday, I was reading a book and I cried pretty much a lot, but this book is honestly up there in the books that made me cry the most. The last like 50 pages I was just crying because, of course, of what was happening, but because I didn't want to leave these characters, and they mean the world to me. And yeah, this is the fourth book, so you should read this series if you haven't. It's amazing. The other book that is also a sequel, actually all the books that I'm going to mention now are sequels. is another one of my sequels to one of my favorite series. It's Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare, which is the second book in the Last Hour series. So the first one is Chain of Gold. You all probably heard of this series, it's very popular. It's like the sequel to the Infernal Devices series, which is basically a series that follows their children. Chain of Iron was amazing, one of my most anticipated releases of 2021. I was obsessed. I love Chain of Gold, it was one of my favorite books, and this book was so amazing. I loved it. I loved it. I loved The Last Hour. I really like the Mortal Instruments, the Infernal Devices, and the Dark Artifices. I really like them, but The Last Hour for me is on a whole other level. I don't really care about the others. I mean, I do care about them, but not as much as I care about The Last Hour. Like, Chain of Gold is and Chain of Iron are my favorite Shadowhunter books ever. Like, no other book from this world level ups to them, in my opinion. So, yeah, I love Chain of Iron. It was so amazing. I just got so many emotions. I read this in like a night. Look at how thick it is! And I started it like before sleeping and I finished it at 7 a.m. Like, I was addicted. And the ending got me on a whole other level of frustration. Like, I love this book with my entire heart. I love all of the characters. They're my love, literally. And I also think it helped that before I read this, I reread Chain of Gold. It was amazing. I loved this book with my entire being. I just am waiting for Chain of Thorns, like, so excited. I'm planning to reread the first two books before. It's coming out in November. We still don't have a cover. I'm kind of very frustrated. Anyway, I love this series. I'm gonna talk about this series a lot. This book is just the sequel to King of Scars by Lee Bardugo, which is Rule of Wolves. Like with Chain of Iron, I reread King of Scars and then I automatically read Rule of Wolves, and I loved it. I know lots of people complain, but I thought it was amazing. I loved the pacing of the book. I thought it was really addictive from the beginning. I loved that it was like there were lots of troubles and lots of stuff happening, and it was just very overwhelming. I love the characters. I have a very big love for Nikolai and Zoya and Nina. I just love this whole world. Wasn't a big fan of King of Scars when I first read it, but rereading it this year, I adored it way more than the first time, and I adored Rule of Wolves. I thought it was really addictive. I wasn't bored at all. I thought it was very plot driven, not very character driven, which I really like sometimes. Like, it's not that much about the characters in this book, it's really about the plot and the problems, and I was just so into it while I was reading it. I was immersed. I constantly wanted to pick it up. I was super addicted. Like, there was some complaints to this book, honestly. Like, some things pissed me off when I read it. But I just had a fun time. Honestly, yeah, that's literally what it was. A very fun time. And I thought the ending was so cool, and I'm super excited for like Six of Crows 3. And like, yeah, the only thing I really didn't like was that in the second half of the book, there were so many POVs that I didn't care about. Like, I did not care about half of these POVs. They were pissing me off. Like, they were just putting me out of the story. So that's the only thing I really didn't like. But other than that, I loved it. Another sequel. After that, I promise I'm done. I just read so many good sequels this year that made me love series even more, so that's really great. The Dragon Republic, which is the sequel to The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This, oh my god, pain. I read The Poppy War the previous year, and I loved it. I mean, I really liked it. It was a 4 stars, but I read it at a very weird pacing that we're not gonna acknowledge. But the second book, that's where it's at, in my opinion. I love this series. It's inspired by Chinese folklore and actually Chinese history. It's about war, and it's so addictive, and it's so complex, but it's so amazing, and all of these characters are like so crazy. Honestly, the second book started off so well. There was a little point in the middle of it where I was a little bit bored, but then it got so wild, and it was so wild. These 700 pages were super fast paced, but also the pacing was really great, and the characters really, I got so attached to them and to their troubles, and I just wanted them to have a nice ending. Of course they didn't have a nice ending, and the ending broke my heart. I cannot tell you how much it was hard for me, and after I stayed in this book for so long, I couldn't get over it, and I don't think I still can get over it, honestly. I think I'm still stuck there with Rin, who is the craziest character ever, literally, but I love her, but she's crazy. Anyway, I loved this book. This was a super amazing sequel, like not 10 times better than the first one, but honestly so much better than the first one in my opinion. I mean, I do love the first one, don't get me wrong, but the second one is so much better, and I do own now the third book. My mom bought it for me for Christmas, so I can't finish the trilogy. I don't want to, but I can. It's so good. You should read The Poppy War. If you like high fantasy, you should read The Poppy War. It's amazing. I cannot wait to read The Burning God. I'm very scared, but I cannot wait. The other book that I don't own because I read this in ebook, but it was amazing, it was a non-fiction, and I read In Order to Live, a young North Korean girl's journey to freedom. It was written by Yeonmi Park, and it's non-fiction, it's a memoir. Yeonmi Park is a North Korean girl. She grew up in North Korea, and then she escaped when she was, I think, 16 with her mother, and we were following things she's living and going through before she gets to freedom. It was so amazing. I read this in like 2 days. I was hooked. I was literally hooked. I loved reading this book. It's very triggering. Like, I would say read the trigger warnings, because the things that this girl had to go through in order to experience freedom were heart-wrenching, but it was a beautiful book. It was super interesting. If you want to know more about how is it to really live in North Korea, how is it to escape North Korea, because that's even harder than living there, not gonna lie. It's super interesting, it goes super in depth. Yeonmi Park's writing was beautiful. I really thought she was a very good writer, and it was very emotional, but also very personal and touching. This book was just so touching, and I loved it. But also, like, getting attached to her as a person and to her family members. It really is weird reading a memoir that you really sometimes forget it's not fiction and it's an actual being, and sometimes you forget that this person is going through stuff, but it's so beautiful, and I loved it so much, and I can only recommend it to you. It was amazing, and this really motivated me to read way more non-fiction and memoirs, because I feel like I would love it. And in 2022, it's gonna be the year I read more memoirs, and I sobbed at the end, like, a lot, because there were like pictures of the people that she was mentioning in the book, and it just felt real. I can only recommend this to you. If you're interested, I mean, this book is very popular. If you haven't read it, you should. The other book that I read this year, and oh, I love it so much, and it's one of my fave, is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. Chloe Gong is the purest human being on earth. That's all. And her duology is amazing. I read These Violent Delights and Our Violent Ends. I don't have Our Violent Ends on this list because it's not one of my favorites of the year, but These Violent Delights certainly is. If you don't know this book, honestly, you're missing out, because it's so amazing. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in Shanghai in 1926, so it's historical fiction. It does have a little bit of fantasy. It's following basically these two characters, Juliet and Roma. They're both heirs to these rival gangs in Shanghai. So Juliet is the heir to the Scarlet Gang, and Roma is the heir to the White Flower. So they're enemies. And they met when they were like 15 years old. They fell in love, got a romance. Then something happened. Roma betrayed Juliet, basically, and they drifted away. Juliet went back to the United States, and we are following her POV as she is 17, 18. She just got back to Shanghai. Juliet is back to Shanghai. She hates Roma. It's her sworn enemy. But there is stuff happening in Shanghai. There is a monster. He's killing people from both gangs. So they have to ally and cooperate. That's all I'm gonna say. It's amazing. It's addictive. It's immersive, the writing style is amazing, it has like everything that you could like in a fantasy slash historical fiction book, historical aspects, lovers to enemies to lovers romance, which is elite, a very interesting setting that you will actually learn a lot from. Scheming, it's amazing, it's perfection. I read this so quickly, I was so addicted. It's so good, and honestly I really love Our Violent Ends too. It's the second and last book of this duology. It's so good too. I read this very like in December I think, and I loved it. It's super addictive. Like the majority of the book was exactly like the first one. I just didn't really love the last 100 pages and the ending. The ending kind of bugged me, so that's why it's not on this list, but I do love this duology as a whole, and I only can recommend it. This series is so amazing and very underrated in my opinion. Like, everyone should read it, and everyone would love it. But the last book on this list is a classic, and it's The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. It has been in my TBR for years, and I started this like totally out of the blue, and I read this so quickly, and it became one of my favorite classics. I love Oscar Wilde, I read many of his plays, and I'm a very big fan, but I never read The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I'm very glad that now I did, because this classic is amazing. It has themes of like beauty and decadence, and how it is to be a horrible human being. It talks about art. The book is amazing, it's beautifully written, like the writing style is elite. It's super interesting and engaging as a classic, you will not be bored, and it's amazing. I don't even know what to say because my words feel very shallow next to such a masterpiece, but I'm very glad 2021 got me to read this book, and that I finally read it, because I have been meaning to for a very long time, and I'm very glad I did, because it's honestly one of my favorite classics. So these books deserve to be read by everyone out there. I think I'm done. I'm so sorry this video was super long. I did my best. I hope you liked it. I hope you liked my first video. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this and giving me a bit of your time. I'll be back for a new video, hopefully. Please, if you liked this video, subscribe if you want to, that would be fun, or comment something, like that would be fun too. Anyway, okay, thank you so much, bye!